So we got a good amount of people coming in. So I am going to go ahead and kick us off. And then as people join, they can just hop right in. So today what we're going to be covering is why your diet is keeping you stuck. So I've been a nutrition coach now for formally running my business for 2 years. I've been in the health and fitness space for more than that. I think it's closer to like 7 years. And that said, I've identified what's really holding people back. And I find that these 3 key things I'm going to talk about tonight are oftentimes what's holding people back from achieving the goals they really want to achieve. We're also going to go over some mindset shifts that you guys need in order to be able to adopt what I'm telling you. It's going to go against what you've commonly known. I'm going to tell you stuff that you're going to say, well, that's totally opposite from what I've been told ever. And we're going to have to be open-minded to allowing us to believe things that maybe we haven't heard before. But trust me, it's science-backed. It's not bullshit. All right. So quick introduction to our agenda, essentially. So who am I? Why should you guys even be taking advice from me? What does that matter? I'm going to be going over that. I'm also going to share some success stories, especially success stories that are going to back my body recomposition method. That way you guys are aware that this shit really works. 3 common diet myths that we need to stop believing, as well as the truth behind them, and how I use a body recomposition strategy. I'm going to get my thing out of the way. How I use a body recomposition strategy to help my active clients reach their goals. I also told you guys that I'm going to be giving away a $175 value bonus to each and every single one of you that are here with me today. And then we will also get into Q&A, so you guys can ask all the questions you want. That said, I have the chat open here next to me. And if you guys want to drop any questions as we go, feel free to drop them. I'll make sure I monitor the chat and keep just answering anything I can as long as it's on topic. If it's a little bit off topic, I will ask that we save that to the end for the Q&A. All right. So hello, I'm Coach Diana. I'm originally a Jersey girl. I went to Boston to become a business major, and I thought I was going to be this big marketing exec. And I eventually had to tell my parents, nope, I'm not going to work in New York City for a major marketing firm. Instead, I'm going to move to California. I quit my full-time corporate job for Reebok headquarters, and I decided I was going to pursue fitness full-time. I had no idea what that looked like. I didn't have a job when I came out here, but I made it work. I became a full-time fitness coach. I was doing part-time fitness coaching on the side when I was living in Boston and working full-time for Reebok. So I did have some stepping stones there, but I worked with countless athletes. And what I saw were people were always doing macro tracking, RP strength, and ridiculous fad diets to reach their goals. And me personally, I knew how damaging these diets were for me. And so I knew how damaging they could be for other people. And I wanted to show people that there was a different way to do things. There was a different way to look at nutrition. What's RP strength? RP strength is Renaissance periodization. It is a very restrictive and strict macro tracking method. They're a massive company. They get people 8-pack abs, but at a cost. So typically any woman who does a cut, I've heard frequently that women lose their periods. It involves carb timing, which is a very advanced method that honestly normal people don't need to use. But it's a major company that I'm very against because I'm like victimized by RP strength. So that's what RP is. Now, with a little bit of help from the pandemic, so I started running this business on the side when I was full-time as a CrossFit coach, general manager of a gym. Pandemic hit, and everyone started investing in their health. They started signing up for nutrition coaching, and things took off for me. And so I made the switch. I went full-time with this business. I still work part-time at my gym because I love it. I love coaching CrossFit. I love staying in connected with the athletes there, but I run this full-time. I like to state that I am the anti-macro counting, anti-restriction nutrition coach. I don't do macro tracking. I don't believe in it. I also don't tell my clients that you cannot have things, right? So what we just mentioned, you can have your Pepsi. We just have to find balance, and that's what's key. I ultimately help people achieve their health and fitness goals through balanced nutrition without the obsessive tracking or restriction. It is possible, and I've helped countless clients do it. And I am on a mission to speak out about how harmful diet fads can be and show people that there truly is a better way. Now, I hope none of you guys have kids on this because I do have a little bit of a potty mouth, and I'm going to be super real with you today. So I didn't always have my shit together, honestly. I personally struggled with obsessive macro tracking and restriction, as well as my body image. So this is an old photo of me back when I was really deep into CrossFit. I was training 2 hours a day, 6 days a week. I was a CrossFit coach as well as a spin coach. So I did spin classes. I would do those classes on top of my weightlifting and everything. I would work out hard no matter how I felt. So if I felt like crap that day, I would still push myself to work out. I didn't mobilize. I didn't do any proper warm-ups or cool downs, and I was just running my body into the ground. And on top of that, I was eating at a caloric deficit, all because I thought at the time that I wanted to lose weight, that I wanted to be thinner than that picture there. And that's pretty messed up. And that shows you how steeped we can be in diet culture at a time and not realize that what we're doing to our bodies is not appropriate. So from that, I rode that restricted binge train for a long time. I would essentially Monday through Friday control my intake to a T. I would macro track, I would meal prep, and I would only eat my food, and I would avoid certain foods that I felt like I had no control around. But on the weekends, I was binging. I would eat until my stomach physically hurt. I was definitely drinking a lot of alcohol because I was partying a ton. I wasn't doing myself any favors, and I was just yo-yoing through this pattern. And I struggled with my eating for over the course of 10 years is kind of like the length that I struggled for. But ultimately what it came down to is this story that I like to tell. So actually I was on RP strength at the time. I was weighing and measuring my food. And I was also on a mass program. This was the first step that I had taken to trying to be healthy. I decided that I wanted to intentionally try to gain 5 pounds to see if I could do it, to see if I could still learn to love my body no matter what weight I was at. So the fact that I was intentionally trying to gain weight, you would think that I was eating enough food, but I wasn't. I was still hungry. I was not eating enough. And I was so restrictive about my food, tracking it and weighing it and measuring it, that one day I plated my food. I remember it clearly that I measured out 33 grams of cashews, put it on my plate, sat down, and my now fiance, Sean, reached over and grabbed a single nut off my plate, and I absolutely lost my shit. I went off on him saying, how could you do that? You know that I'm working really hard towards my goals. You know, I just perfectly weighed this out. You could have gotten your own. And the quote that I said to him that stuck out to me was, this is all I get to have. So you would think that if I was intentionally trying to gain weight, I would be eating food in a surplus. I wouldn't have this restrictive mindset about food, but I did. And after I came out of that hyper emotional state and I took a step back and I addressed what happened, I was like, this is messed up. I can't keep living my life like this. I'm a really impulsive person. So I did ditch food tracking and all counting a little bit quickly. I just dumped it all and immediately said, I'm done with it. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that for everybody, but that's what I did. And I decided to utilize my nutrition education as a way to reset my relationship with food, my body, and learn how to fuel myself appropriately. It took a lot of trial and error and figuring it out and really resetting a lot of my habits and how I thought about food. But ultimately, I did end up healing my relationship with food. I let go of that guilt and obsession that I had been taught to constantly diet. And I found true food freedom, which means that I eat whatever I want. I really don't restrict. I eat the foods that I love. I find balance and moderation. And yet, this picture is still what I look like. I look pretty much the same as when I was restricting, but I feel better and I have a better relationship with myself and with my food. So it goes to show that just because you guys find that food freedom, because you're not counting every single little thing that you eat, you can still reach your fitness goals. You don't have to sacrifice those. You don't have to sacrifice weight loss goals, body composition goals, any kind. You can do it with freedom. And I decided I wanted to show people that this was possible and help them do it. And that's ultimately how I started this business. So one of my clients, this is Jonna. Jonna had previously used macro tracking and very specifically carb timing, similar to what I mentioned with RP strength. The idea behind carb timing is you eat your carbs closer to your workouts and you eat fats further away. This is a high level advanced strategy that the average person does not need to do. It's incredibly unnecessary and very difficult to time your meals, especially if life gets in the way and your workout gets messed up. So long story short, she found these methods super tedious. They were restrictive. She struggled with managing cravings, and overall, she didn't want to be miserable. She was a mom of two beautiful girls at the time when she started working with me. It was her postpartum journey after her second girl. I'm super excited that now she is actually starting her postpartum journey after her third girl that she just gave birth to. But she came to me to lose that postpartum weight in a healthy and sustainable way. We worked together through the holidays. She signed up with me like right before Christmas, I believe. And then the start of the pandemic, all of a sudden, all of this stress out the wazoo. And despite all of that, Jonna maintained consistent progress towards her goals. I actually think that she is an anomaly when it comes to weight loss programs, because if you look at her weight loss, it truly did consistently go down. She had some plateaus here and there for sure, which is super normal, but she overall was able to be really consistent in her entire journey. Not only did she achieve her weight loss goal, but more importantly, she felt like nutrition was much more easy for her to navigate on her own. Planning ahead and doing all of that was so simple to her, even though she was juggling two girls in the middle of a pandemic. And she felt really confident on staying on track, navigating every single obstacle that was thrown her way. And now she eats intuitively and hasn't tracked a single macro since. Something I like to mention about Jonna's journey is when she came to me, she had a very specific goal in mind. She had wanted to get to around like 155 pounds or so. And she had that number in her head. She ended up deciding to stop her weight loss prior to reaching that number because she realized that she was perfectly happy in her body where she netted at finally. And that is part of body recomposition. Even though that she was on a weight loss journey, she was also exercising. She was doing CrossFit at the time. And she had built muscle, and she realized that she didn't need to reach a specific weight per se to be happy, but she found that she was very happy with her overall body composition at the end of her journey. The next client I want you to meet is Alexis. Alexis is the classic case of somebody who had tried every single diet in the book, but nothing was working for her. The diet she had done previously prior to working with me it had helped her lose 10 pounds, but she followed a very strict meal plan that involved eating 6 meals a day. And her calories were set at about 1,400 to 1,500 calories, right in between there. And she was miserable. She was really busy as both a student and somebody who worked. So 6 meals a day wasn't realistic for her. And from the fact that she was following a meal plan, she didn't feel comfortable or confident veering very far off that meal plan. So not only did she want to feel more confident in her body when she came to me looking to reach that goal, but she also said that she wanted to support a lifestyle of being able to go out to eat with her partner without feeling guilty about her food choices. In the beginning, Alexis was actually really afraid to increase her caloric intake, which is super normal with a lot of the clients that I work with. If you have chronically dieted in the past, I understand why it's so scary to increase your food intake because you think you're automatically going to gain fat. So with her, I made sure to take everything at the pace that she was fully comfortable with. I wanted to make sure that she felt confident with the decisions that were being made, and we weren't pushing her too far outside her comfort zone where she would revert back to old diet mindset. But ultimately, we did get her to over 1,800 calories. Alexis is now eating more. She's finally reaching that physique that she's been trying to get for years. And she still goes out to eat with her partner and has eliminated all of her food-related guilt. Nutrition really doesn't have to be that difficult. We have been told contradictory and confusing information time and time again. So you're probably feeling some whiplash from the dietary advice. The idea that every time we Google for dietary advice, we're getting totally different answers. Cut carbs, don't cut carbs, go keto, high fat's going to make you fat. It's making us all so confused. And there's so much misinformation that's driven by diets and diet culture that it's so hard to know what's true. Ultimately, what you need to know is that diets set you up to fail. The diet industry just wants to help you get this really fast, drastic transformation because that's really marketable for them. If they can post your six-pack abs or extreme weight loss, that's all they care about. They ultimately don't care about what happens after you've done the program. If you regain that weight back, if you spiral into some kind of restrictive pattern because you think that you can't increase your calories, most diets don't care because they figure that you're going to be a returning customer anyway. And finally, it's time to get back to the basics. Most people are looking for complex answers when nutrition at its core is simple. People want to be told that there is a specific meal plan to follow, or there's a specific rule of thumb that will get them the results that they want. But what I'm going to teach you tonight is we're going to get back to the basics. We're going to get back to balanced eating, getting in touch with our body cues, and understanding how to eat like we're human. Super quick check in the chat if there's time for questions. Yeah, so Chelsea, that one, can you hold on to that? I would love to touch upon that in the Q&A because it's a little bit more specific. And I think we're definitely going to cover some of that during the class today. All right, so here's what I want to do. It's time to bust some myths and unfuck your mindset when it comes to nutrition. To do so, I need you to be able and open to change what you think about nutrition. Trust me on this. I know it's going to be a little bit scary to hear some of the things that I'm going to talk about. It's going to go against what you already know, but I have clients that this works for. Ooh, I already revealed one. Okay. So the first myth that we need to tackle is you need to be in a caloric deficit to get lean and toned. This is the common trope, the idea that everyone's in a caloric deficit. No matter what you want to do, you just got to cut your calories, eat less, and you'll get there. This is where I don't agree. Sometimes you do need more fuel, not less. All right. And what I see consistently is more often than not, people are eating too little, and this is hindering their goals. If you're coming to me telling me that you're eating 1,200 calories, 1,400 calories, that is not enough for a grown-ass human. So you need to be eating more. Here's why. First of all, if you're physically active, whether it's doing intentional exercise, some kind of resistance training, whether you do CrossFit, HIIT, boot camp, maybe you're just really active out in the wild, like you go on hikes, you go on walks regularly. Maybe you're really active in your job. I've worked with people like that. You need to fuel your body, and you need enough energy, which comes in the form of calories, in order to do that. You also need fuel from muscle growth and recovery. So for one, you need protein in order to build muscle. If you don't eat enough carbs and fat, your body is going to use protein for energy. And then we don't have enough protein for our muscles. From a recovery standpoint, when we don't eat enough, we're not fueling that muscle growth and recovery. You're going to find that you're more sore. You might find that you get sick more frequently. You might find that you lack energy. We need that energy to burn. Without this fuel, your body cannot properly perform or recover properly, which is going to work against your goals. Imagine this. If you're not fueling well enough, then you're probably going to get a pretty crappy workout. And if you get a crappy workout, are you really going to be able to reach whether it's your physique goals or your weight loss goals? Probably not. So we need to fuel for that. Also note that being at too low of a calorie deficit, the reason why it's going against your goals is a couple of these reasons here. First of all, caloric deficits and dieting is stress. If you're already stressed and you're adding more stress onto your body is going to in turn hold fat and gain weight. Okay, that's just part of our bodily process. If we are not incorporating enough recovery, we're going to struggle to lose weight. You can also ultimately end up slowing your metabolism down, which makes weight loss more difficult. So if we're at too much of a caloric deficit, your body is essentially going to hold on to those calories a little bit more. It's going to burn slower. It's not going to operate at its peak performance. And then those calories aren't at a deficit are still not going to result in weight loss. And I already mentioned this point before, but if you're in too much of a caloric deficit, you're not going to get a good enough workout with the lack of energy. I really want to clarify your goals now. So most people come to me and tell me that they want to lose weight. But when I ask them to explain that to me, they say, well, I want to feel toned. I want to have muscle. I want to have a physique. So what you really want is you want to build muscle. Automatically going into a caloric deficit, shedding a bunch of weight isn't going to magically reveal muscle if you haven't built it. So it's important that we do that. And this is where I use that body recomposition strategy that I won't shut up about and never will. Most of my active clients are on a body recomposition plan. The goal of this plan is to burn fat and build muscle at the same time. Some people will tell you that's not possible. It is. In comparison, so understand what I do on a weight loss plan and what a body recomposition plan does. I will put somebody on a weight loss plan if they have over 15 pounds to lose. Okay. That can help kickstart their journey. And if you lose enough weight to a certain point, you can go into maintenance and move into body recomposition. But if somebody tells me that they want to lose anywhere between 10 to 15 pounds or less, a body recomposition strategy is going to be an excellent way to ensure that they can eat the maximum amount of food possible while still reaching that fat loss goal and creating the toned physique that they're actually looking for. So how can you actually achieve a body recomposition through your nutrition? First is you need to increase overall calories. Now, the way that we do this, we can't go all in. Like I said, I'm really impulsive. I tend to go all in. I don't recommend those strategies for everybody. Instead, you want what's called a reverse diet. The point of a reverse diet is to very slowly increase your calories over a period of time, allow your body to get used to the increased calories, as well as it starts to speed up your metabolism. And the ultimate goal is to not increase fat gain. So by doing it slowly, you acclimate your body and you're not necessarily going to gain weight on this plan. You also need to reallocate your macros. So what I find is most people who come to me are typically eating too high carbs and too high fats, or maybe it's one or the other. Either way, their macros are not balanced. Most of the time, I find people are under eating protein and they're under eating vegetables. So what I do is I increase their protein intake, slightly decrease their carb and fat intake, and also increase their vegetable intake. Something I really quickly want to mention about macro tracking is that they tell you to focus on protein, carbs, and fats, which doesn't guarantee that you're getting enough vegetables in your diet. And a lot of times people on deficits will essentially exclude typical carbohydrates and only use vegetables as their carbs. And this totally throws our bodies out of whack and out of balance. Instead, I really want to make sure I focus on with my clients protein, carb, fat, and vegetable to ensure they're getting adequate intake of everything and we're not restricting carbs. Finally, we need to improve the quality of food that you're eating. And I'm going to go over this in the next myth as well in more detail. But ultimately, I say that word a lot, so I'm going to try to say that less. What we're trying to do is replace any kind of low nutrient dense foods, high caloric dense foods with more nutrient dense foods. We want to make sure that we're eating things that are going to provide us with micronutrients as well, vitamins, minerals, fiber, things that are going to actually keep us full and satiated. When I tell people you need to eat more, you'll learn that when it comes down to what you're consuming. If we eat a plate of broccoli versus a plate of Fritos chips, one is going to be more calorically dense, the Frito chips, and they're not going to be as nutrient dense. As a result, they're not going to keep you full and you can eat way more, but you're going to consume more calories versus you're not going to be able to eat in volume as much broccoli because it has fiber in it and it's going to fill you up. And so you're going to eat a huge plate of it, but you're not necessarily going to consume as many calories. And so that's the idea of shifting the types of food that you're eating. And obviously that's a high level, very basic example. I would like people eating an array of foods on their plates. The second myth is going to be eating carbs will cause weight gain and you should restrict them in order to reach your goals. And I see this all the time as people come to me and they're afraid to eat carbs or they're afraid to eat certain foods that tend to be higher in carbohydrate value. But the truth is that carbs are fuel for your body and also they're delicious. So the reason why we demonize carbs is honestly because of the rise of the Atkins diet. Since that diet, more diets have also continued to make people feel guilty for consuming carbs and have led to the belief that carbs equal getting fat. Carbs are actually necessary and a requirement for fueling your exercise in the gym, as well as your day-to-day activities. This is the primary source of energy that the body likes to go to. It's not that eating carbs makes us gain weight, but it's often that we don't have an appropriate balance of our macronutrients and we overeat carbohydrates and especially processed ones. So this goes back to what I had mentioned in the body recomposition. It's not that eating carbs is bad for you. It's just chances are you're too high in your carbohydrate intake and you're not eating a good array of carbohydrates and you're relying too much on overly processed ones. So this is where I like to increase that protein and vegetable intake, help you feel more full and satisfied, which naturally decreases your carbohydrate intake. And as long as we're eating mostly whole real food carbs, those are going to fuel us much better than processed carbs. The way I help my clients see carbs on a more balanced level and not be afraid of them is through the food continuum. So I mentioned to you guys in the beginning, I don't believe in restriction. Instead, I believe in viewing foods on a 3-point scale. The first one is going to be eat more. These are going to be nutrient dense whole foods that are minimally processed. The way I like to oversimplify this is think about these as eat daily. Incorporate them in your diet on a regular basis. The second level is eat some. These are going to be foods that are mostly nutrient dense. They might be somewhat processed and they may have some downsides when they're eaten in excess. And we want to think about these as eat weekly. Once again, that's oversimplifying it, but that's how I want you to think. Finally, we've got eat less. These are going to be your calorie dense foods that are processed. They have downsides when they're eaten frequently. So think about incorporating these in your diet on a monthly basis or just a semi-regular basis. We don't want to be fueling our bodies with these all the time. Here are some examples of what fall in these categories. The eat more is going to look like beans and lentils, oats, whole grain foods, potatoes, plain yogurt, fruit, as well as corn. Our eat some is going to be things like couscous, white rice. It's a little bit harder for our bodies to digest. Granola and granola bars, those tend to be a little bit higher in sugar. It's not to say that they're bad for you. We just don't want to overconsume them. Instant oats, same thing, higher in sugar. Milk, vegetable juices, flavored yogurt, dried fruit. Pretty much most of these are higher in sugar, but they provide some nutrient value. Eat less are going to be things like cereal bars, fruit juices, honey and syrups, canned fruit with added sugar, soda, crackers, sugar, and any kind of foods that have over 10 grams of added sugar, right? Those foods are not going to fuel us per se, but I'll never turn down a chocolate chip cookie. I think they're delicious and I'm going to incorporate them in my diet. And I'm going to teach my clients how to do the same. When we can look at foods less as good and bad and more as eat more, eat some, eat less, we can begin to lift that fear that we have around eating certain foods. And we can say, I can have that food. I'm just not going to eat it all the time. To touch upon tips on willpower that came up earlier, there's a phrase that I think a lot of people don't realize is really true. And that's going to be when you give yourself permission to eat all the foods, you're not going to lose control over them. So I mentioned before that back in my disordered eating days, I felt like I would lose all control around, like if there were donuts in the office, I felt like all I could think about were the donuts and how I was trying so hard to not eat them. Same thing with chips. I felt like I never had control over myself around chips and I would never keep them in the home because if I kept them in my home, I would probably binge on them. Versus now, I keep whatever food that I want in my home. I don't have an issue with feeling like I'm being drawn to it at all times. I don't feel like I'm fighting my willpower all the time. I'm allowed to eat those foods. I've given myself that permission, but I eat them when I truly want them. Not just because they're around, not just because they're in front of my face, and not because I'm dieting and I'm trying to avoid them, but I cave. I incorporate them into my diet when I want. And as a result, I don't feel like I'm constantly fighting myself and have to utilize my willpower to avoid them. The final myth that we're going to touch upon is the myth that you have to eat exactly the same intake every day to be consistent and to see results. This myth comes straight out of macro tracking and calorie counting. The idea that they give you a prescribed amount that you're supposed to eat and you have to hit your numbers perfectly every day. And if you hit them perfectly, then you're going to see results. My clients don't track macros. We don't do that. My clients don't eat perfectly every single day, and yet they still see results. How? First of all, it's normal for energy output to vary each day. So why can't we also normalize varying our input? think about it. During the week, this is a really great, very specific example. I used to use a Fitbit that tracked all my steps. And when I was a full-time CrossFit coach, not only did I work out about 4 to 5 days a week with high intensity exercise, but in addition, I was on my feet pretty much all day coaching. And then I would also take my dog for walks. I was hitting something like over 17,000 steps every single day when I worked. So on Sundays, my Fitbit would go off on me and be like, "Oh my God, you've only hit 400 steps." And I'd be like, "Yeah, that's fine. I've done enough during the week." So would it make sense for me to eat exactly the same way as I did on days where I was getting 17,000 steps and a workout in, as the days where I was getting 400 steps and most likely being a couch potato because I was exhausted by then? Not really. And sometimes you might find that on your less active days, you still want to eat more because you're still recovering from the workout the day before. So then how do we know how much we're supposed to eat? I like to teach people to actually go by their body cues, understand how to recognize your hunger and your fullness, and then be able to respond to that appropriately. Yes, I give my clients a direction on how much to eat according to their goals, but what I use is the hand portion method. So you physically use your hands to portion out your food. And the idea is not that we're scooping our food into our hands to figure out how much we're eating, but to train our eyes to see portions. So my clients aren't using their hands all the time, it's a point of reference. Instead, over time, they're able to plate their food by visually seeing it, and then they use their body cues to refine their intake as needed. And then on top of that, I try to get them to follow an 80-20 mindset. I want you to be consistent at least 80% of the time. And if you can do that, you will reach your goals. Now, to be honest, I'm not working with bikini competitors, and I do believe that bikini competitors and athletes are going to need to reach over 80% consistency because they're competing. But we're normal people and we're human, we're fallible. So in that case, 80% is enough. And 20% of the time, that leaves you some flexibility to make decisions that maybe you're not eat more foods, you're eat some and eat less foods. Maybe you're not eating to the fullest maximum amount that has been recommended to you, but you're right within that range. It allows you to make mistakes without beating yourself up over it. Not to mention, a lot of times when people do macro counting and calorie counting, they get into a routine, and that's what they'll tell you. They're like, "Oh, I don't have to track. I'm just in my routine now." And then you find that they eat the same thing all the time because they can't be bothered, or it's just too much effort to try to figure out how to incorporate different foods in. But when we limit the foods that we can eat, we're not as healthy as we can be. Variation in foods means variation in micronutrients. It means that we're going to have a healthier gut microbiome. We're going to be able to digest more, and we're overall going to be healthier people. What it all really comes down to is sustainability. Rigid routines might make you consistent and successful in the short term, but it can lead to burnout. And if you're burnt out, you're going to fall off. So if you feel like you're following this yo-yo pattern with your diet, then that might be what's happening, is that you're doing too much restriction, too much rigidity until you burn out and you fall off. My clients thrive and are successful because their routines are flexible. They can eat whatever they want. If they're going out over the weekend, we'll strategize how they can do that and still stay on plan. But they also have the guidance of their hand portion guide, as well as the eat more, some less continuum, to help them make mindful decisions on the go. They also know how to adapt when circumstances are not routine. I've worked with clients through massive moves, through deaths in the family, through a raging pandemic, and you can't find routine sometimes when things are really working against you, but you have to learn how to be adaptable. And if your routine is too rigid, it's going to be very hard to do that. And the goal for me is, I tell all my clients, I want to be their last coach. I don't want them to need another coach after me. I want to be able to teach them how to do this for the rest of their lives. I don't want them to be constantly going on diets endlessly. And the point of everything that I do is to set them up for long-term success so that they can do this for the rest of their life. It's sustainable for the rest of their life. Their routine might change. What they do might change based on how their life changes, but I will help them be adaptable so they know how to continue to maintain this no matter what. So I mentioned before that I help my clients listen to their body cues. And I like to do a combination of intuitive eating with guided nutrition to help people reach their goals. That way they don't have to rely heavily on tracking. That way they don't feel restricted or rigid in any case. So I'm going to give you guys a few tips so you can kick off your intuitive eating journey. The first step is being able to recognize when you're truly hungry. Before you eat, really check in with yourself and ask, am I hungry? And start to ask yourself questions like, am I stressed? Am I eating out of boredom? Am I eating out of emotion? If that's the case, we might not want to reach for food in that moment. We want to truly eat when we're actually hungry. Most importantly, eat slowly and mindfully. And what that means, mindful eating means you're being present with your meal. And most of us are not present these days. We are, and I can say this from experience, right? We're constantly distracted. We're on our phones all the time. We need to be stimulated at all times. I challenge you tonight to eat your next meal with no distractions. Put your phone away and only focus on your food. And I promise you, you will probably be uncomfortable. And that's a discomfort that we need to push through because we need to start to be able to connect with our food again. The faster we eat, the harder it is for us to recognize when we're full. And so it's critical that we slow it down.
Every night.
Oh, I'll just ask you to put yourself on mute. And so that's where it's really important that we stop when you're full. And you're not going to be able to do this tip if you don't do the one prior. If you don't eat slowly and mindfully, you're going to struggle identifying where what I call 80% fullness is. The way I describe 80% fullness is if you're looking at your plate, you could physically fit more in your body, but you don't need to. I'm just going to do. But you don't need to eat past that point. 100% fullness would be like, you probably can't fit anymore. Beyond that is when you're feeling overstuffed and uncomfortable. We want to avoid those feelings of discomfort and stop when we're truly comfortable and when we're actually full. If you're not sure, sit and wait and just assess how you're feeling. Finally, understand the why behind your cravings. Cravings is your body's way of telling you that you're missing something. I find a lot of times that people tell me that, oh, I have a sweet tooth. Well, if they're not eating carbohydrates, their body's asking for carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are processed in the body essentially as glucose, which is sugar. So if you're not eating enough carbohydrates, your body's going to crave sugar. And oftentimes that's usually where sugar cravings come from, is because we're restricting our carbohydrates so much. I have found that clients notice that their cravings increase when they're not eating as much nutrient-dense foods, when they're low on their intake, whatever that might be. Jonna, the client that I brought up earlier, would always recognize that she was low on protein because her cravings would increase. And she would go through her head and go, okay, like how many protein servings have I had? She'd find out that she's missing a serving and would say, oh, well, that's where my cravings coming from. And she would know how to respond. I'm not going to say this last tip is easy. It's going to take a lot more time of listening to your body, getting acclimated to what it's saying, and understanding really what your intake looks like. What can be really helpful is a food journal. Write down what you're eating, write down when you're craving, and see if you notice any trends pop up.